Hey everybody, it's me, vocal coach Mary Z. Some of you might remember this video that I made about low voices. I got a lot of commentary on something that I want to take a deep dive into today, and that's the concept of something called voice type versus vocal range. Why do I make a difference, and why knowing your vocal range is truly a voice hack. All right, so a lot of you know me mainly for extreme vocals, whether it's me as a performer or as a vocal coach and vocal instructor. But the background to all of that and my primary thing is actually singing, clean singing. Some of the comments I was getting on the other video where I sort of broke down the vocal ranges the way that I see them was from people who clearly had like classical training or formal vocal training outside of modern styles. There were a lot of comments left about voice type. Voice type is something that people do in classical singing primarily, but sometimes we see it in more theatrical or formal singing. It's not our vocal choir placement, by the way. We'll get to that in a little bit. But voice type is more of an artistic, it's not really scientific at all. It's an artistic way of classifying the tone color of someone's voice and their note range together as a total package. This is because singing is not just a science, it's an art. And long before it was a science, it was more of an art because we didn't really know that much about what's going on in here. And a lot of the ways that we would traditionally classify voices with old classical parameters set are coming from subjective things like what subjectively your tone color of your voice might be, which tone color or timbre is just what makes you sound you. We'll get into that a little bit more in a second, but that can be pretty subjective. And then matching that tone color within one of the major vocal ranges. And there's different classification systems that do this, but I find those things to be way more confusing than helpful. And also, they don't translate to my modern singers, my rock and metal singers that I'm coaching every day. It doesn't really work for them. Color is always going to be there. So tone color is what makes you sound like you, what makes someone sound like them. And you can kind of look at it as bright to dark. You could look at my voice being a little bit warmer or darker, whereas somebody like an Ariana Grande, a much brighter, sharper tone to her voice. And that's outside of vocal range. But if we looked at people with all of the same vocal range, let's take three sopranos, for example, and we listened to Celine Dion, Kelly Clarkson, and Mariah Carey all sing the same song. Even if it was in the same key and they're singing with their same belt or style, we would definitely be able to tell which one of them is singing. And that, us being able to tell, is their natural tone or timbre. What I've found in my 25 years of teaching people, and I know that seems like a really long time to a lot of you guys, but I take this time to remind you that I'm a little bit older than you may think I am. I'm 43, and I used to not tell people how old I was, but I do that now because you guys don't understand how I know certain things or how I can have this big of a data sampling of students. And I've had hundreds of vocal clients, and which is essentially a giant data sampling of study. So I have taken all of those students as far as I can get them in their vocal ranges. And we each do have a set vocal range where it's going to max out. And this has to do with physics of singing. And my modern singers do not benefit from voice typing. They benefit from vocal range because color is still there, but we're not going to determine our repertoire on it. And it doesn't seem to affect where our belt break, aka chest voice, which I actually dislike that term a lot, but I'm going to use it sometimes so you guys can take my terms and have them make more sense to you. That chest or belt voice, we have a break. It's a subset of our range, and that is the primary reason why modern singers can't relate to classical voice typing. It's fine if you want to call yourself whatever. just to preface my breakdown here, this is what my data sampling has told me and what I found effective with my vocal clients. But again, it's just as much art as it is science. So if you have a different way you want to think about it and classify it any way that you want, or you have a different way you teach, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. So I would love to keep the attitude here on my channel of we're going to just tamp down some of the vitriol artists get when they argue with each other on the internet, especially in the vocal community. There seems to be a lot of that. And it really doesn't need to be that way. We can learn from each other, and not one way is the way. But this is what my data sampling of all of my students has shown me that the majority of human beings can work with. We really want to keep away from exceptions. So we're going to look at the way that I look at it, which is vocal range. Range over color, always. Range over timbre, not style. Style can be our belt, aka chest voice, what I call our mixed voice, one of our 2 type of head voices, or our vertical placement. So if you're not sure what I mean by that, check out some of my tutorials on this channel about singing style and placement. I think that will make things a little bit different, but that is only based on certain things that are happening physiologically to us. We each have a range, period, because of physiology. Why can't I just take my voice and make it higher? I'm a vocal coach, right? Shouldn't I know how to do that? Well, I can sing my own high notes just fine relative to me with my vocal cords, but I can't take the whole vocal range and transpose it up, because your vocal cords, also called vocal folds, are really 3-dimensional string physics at play. They're beholden to those rules just like all other stringed instrument, only it's a pretty fascinating stringed instrument because it's vibrated with wind, and we're controlling it through these abstract thoughts that lengthen and shorten our chords to different pitches without us even really directly thinking about it in that sense, the way we would with our hands when we play an instrument. We would fret or pluck the strings and change the pitch by changing the length, fretting it usually. And so we don't do that with our vocal cords, although they're doing that. When we can't really feel them. You can't really feel your true vocal folds or true vocal cords. Otherwise, you would feel a lot of, similar to what we feel in harsh vocals and extreme vocals, itchy, scratchy vibrations when we have sound waves going through there. But anyway, the point is that they have a set length and width by the time that you're an adult. Your vocal range is separate from your timbre because your range is going to be based on the length and width that your vocal cords grew to, and the typical max capacity of those set of chords. And then timbre and tone color is just, whether it's bright or dark or whatever, is going to be based on the rest of your shape, the resonant cavities, the way that you're shaped physiologically. I divide the categories by sex, and we have female and male voice types, and they overlap in the middle to where it doesn't necessarily matter which of the selections you use, but it does give us a context of where they are relative, and that will also play a role. So we're going to go through and talk about that. What I've discovered overall is that most human beings have the capacity to get 3 to 3.5 total octaves with training, of course. You're not going to get that singing along with the radio in your living room unless you're really, really challenging yourself, but that their chords can pretty much stretch that far, 3 to 3.5 total octaves. And then usually our belt register, aka chest voice, that we use in our rock singing or pretty much all modern non-classical genres, that voice, nay, that's a subset of our total range, which usually maxes out at 2 to 2.5 octaves of our total vocal range. We definitely have to train to get there. It's like it's like saying your arms have the potential to lift this much weight without modifying your body with some sort of steroids. Well, obviously they can't lift that much weight day one, right? So it's the same thing, but there is a max. The reason I can't change my vocal range to become a soprano is because I cannot change the shape of my vocal cords and the pitches with which they will phonate. And you'll see that because there's a point at which we can't get to no matter how much we practice. It gives us an idea of, okay, I know about how much I could work towards, and which songs I will never get, low or high. There's some bass things that are out of my range. There's soprano things that are out of my physical capacity as a vocalist, that no matter how much you train, you cannot reach those notes. I mean, you can stretch and stretch and stretch, but there's still a physiological limit. Most people who are exceptions, which obviously do exist, people like Dimash, Corey Taylor, Mike Patton, Diamanda Galas, people with 4, 5 octaves. These type of people do exist, but they are physiological exceptions. Just like when you have physiological exceptions in athletes and stuff, you can have a bunch of professional athletes, but if one has, just an extra inch of height or an extra physical feature that's allowing them to perform slightly better than the rest of the pros, they're going to be the best of the best. And oftentimes, famous people with exceptional ranges we're fixating on, but I have had almost no exceptional, like as far as how far their voice physiology could take them in real life lessons. And I only know one person in real life who has an actual 5 octave vocal range. This is something that can and does happen, but most of you will get to 3.5 octaves. I actually had someone take lessons and say, I've sing 3.5 octaves, and no matter how much I practice, it doesn't go any further. And I was like, well, that's because unfortunately, that's typically it, for most human beings. But that's a huge amount of range. And believe it or not, that's the amount of range that many of our favorite singers have had that seem like they have really wide ranges because they're just really, really functional at using it and they're not afraid to explore it. Or they had vocal training that made them access it and help them get at the full length of their chords. So you'll see people take vocal lessons and say, oh, well, my range expanded by like 2 octaves. Maybe, sort of. It was always there within your potential, but you definitely had to train to access it. Most people won't ever have the opportunity to say, though, I expanded my vocal range to 5, 6 octaves. It can't extend indefinitely. It's physics. And so unfortunately, even for someone like me who has an unusual voice, imagine if I was trying to sing really, really high like Ann Wilson in the same style on the same note, like in my belt voice. I don't think I can do that, right? I can't access those songs in the same way, in the same key with the chords that I have. Just like she can't access the same lows. So just to be clear, our vocal range, it's always transposed. You don't get the highs with the high voice and the lows, unfortunately. Same thing with the low voice. Everything is just going to be transposed. But what does it mean if we all have around the same amount of range access, but just starting and ending at different points on the piano? That's actually liberating, not limiting. That means that if you get used to the key and understanding key signatures and moving the key of a song up or down and what your own vocal range is, then you can have a lot more success at putting songs in the correct key for your voice. And this may change as you're training. As you get access to more of your belt register on the high end, you might notice you don't have to transpose down as far anymore. This happens. So this may also change as your skill changes a little bit, but your overall vocal range isn't going to change. Again, going back to the concept of choir doesn't equal your voice type when you're accessing 3.5 octaves of notes, you could probably sing several parts in choir, which I have done, including soprano, which I am definitely not a soprano. So whatever your voice type was in choir, don't assume that that's your vocal range. A lot of those notes are in overlap ranges, and many, many of us could fill in many parts in a choir. Let's take a look at the vocal ranges. So for starting with women, going from the top down, and the way you're going to find out if you can't access your full vocal range right away, the way that you find out what you are is by your lowest note. I can almost always get people either with my vocal exercises or through my lessons to come down to their lowest note, just even on day one within the first couple of lessons. Really work with some of my exercises and see how low you can go. We're going to be using a standard reference here where middle C is C4. And also be careful. Some MIDI programs will assign that to a different number. And so you want to make sure that when you're looking at things and comparing notes, what I have here, that middle C, na. This note is C4, okay? And then we change the numbers at C, not A and B. I don't know why we do that, but it's just what we do. Probably because visually it makes more sense when you look at a piano. And so it's not going to be, when we say A3, it's the note right below middle C. C4, B3, A3, okay? So just so like we're clear on what's going on, what do I mean by this? Coloratura Sopranos is going to be our highest, okay? And again, classical people who want to use voice typing, get out of here. We're going to be thinking only in terms of modern vocals and being very strict with range, okay? Coloratura, these are high voice sopranos who may only actually have about 3 total singing octaves and an octave and a half of belt range. You're going to start. Hey everyone, Mary Z from VoiceHacks here to tell you about the website platform that I use, the software that I use to help me organize my online vocal lessons. And I've used it for years. It's called simplybook.me. If you're a music teacher and you're trying to organize your lessons online, this is a great software for you. It can help you organize all of your services and classes, even those with international students. This is my booking website. So it's a website and booking platform. I can show people my reviews. They can book their classes and services as well as their online Zoom lessons. They can look at everything in their own local time zone throughout the world. So my availability is just set and it will display for them in the local time zone. So if you're interested in this, visit simplybook.me via my link below in the description of this video, and you will get a free trial. Your lowest note is probably middle C, starting here. And then you can probably train to belt all the way up to your octave and a half, which is G5, which that seems kind of crazy for those of us with low voices. But when we go back and listen, that's only an octave and a half from this person's lowest note. And most belt ranges are 2 to 2.5 octaves. So it's not that crazy when you actually have a high voice. And when you listen to some people like Celine Dion and Kelly Clarkson, you can hear them actually belting Ann Wilson, notes like that. Not head voicing, not mixing, belting, using their full voice. That's the subset. And then the total vocal range will probably go up to somewhere like G6 or A6, which would be something like here, where you're going to be able to be singing a lot of whistle tones, you know. So this is somebody I would say like an Ariana Grande. Mariah Carey falls into the exception category. She has more octaves than typical, which is also part of why she's super famous. Her lowest note extends beyond. If any of you fall into the exception and you end up getting more, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. I will take people as far as they can go, but I'm telling you, most people just don't go farther than these things. So it just gives you realistic expectations. So if we go down a little bit further, we're going to look at regular soprano. Regular soprano is actually most women's voices, and most of you will probably be able to get your belt or chest voice to extend down to maybe G or F below middle C. G or F3. Nay, nay, nay. That's probably about as low as you can go. If that, a lot of classical repertoire doesn't go, for sopranos in general, doesn't go below middle C. And then when we're looking at that, the belt range is the same. You're only getting a couple extra notes on the low end. Your highest belt capacity potential could end up at G5, and then probably not as many whistle tones, probably ending your range around F6. Regular sopranos. And then mezzo-sopranos, don't let that hyphen to soprano. Mezzo-sopranos are what most people call altos. It's just called that, so you really want to call yourself a mezzo. But a lot of people are just going to call you an alto. And a mezzo could have a really dark tone color as well and use their low voice, you know. So it's really, really unusual to be someone like me who's a little bit below mezzo. Mezzo also overlaps. We're going to talk about the male voice types here with countertenor. So mezzo and countertenor are going to be the same. And countertenors would be our super high male voices like Chester Bennington, but I'm thinking a little bit more like Geddy Lee, Justin Timberlake, The Weeknd, all of these guys, Robert Plant. In metal, I think these are guys like Sam Carter. I think he's more of a countertenor than a tenor. But people like the guy from North Lane, Good Tiger, voices like this. So these people usually can't sing below C3. So this is for mezzo-sopranos and countertenors. Da, that's C3, D3, C3. So it's usually D3. A lot of mezzos, it's D. That's usually where it ends down there. And I mean, that's pretty low on the piano. It will sound really low and husky in their voice, but they're not like really true altos. And for the male voice type, that's going to feel like a soprano, like relative to guys. It really isn't. But it's the highest male voice type, and it's going to sound like that. And so then the belt range, we can typically train to belt. I've had my mezzos trained to about E, usually E5. I cannot belt that. D5, E5 is usually what we're looking for our belt max, which is usually more like just over 2 octaves if we're going from C to E or something. Occasionally, one of my mezzos has actually eked out a belt F5, but the classification we're going to base on that low note there. And again, many of people will call you altos, but a lot of mezzos, we have mezzos like Lady Gaga, Rihanna, and Adele, but then we also have mezzos like Courtney LaPlante, Tatiana from Ginger, mezzos using sort of their low register as well, like Shirley Manson from Garbage and Taylor Momsen from Pretty Reckless. Annie Lennox also. This is where the color is dark and it's kind of playing tricks on our ears. But again, we want to go range over color in modern music because of that belt break, because it's going to make a big difference, unfortunately. We are going to go down to contralto, where I live, and which is overlaps with regular tenor. And guys, which is most high voice guys are regular tenor. So contraltos and regular tenors can typically sing down below C3 on a very consistent basis, daily basis. Here's C3. Da, 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 da. There we are getting to da, da, da. G3 there, or G2, I'm sorry, G2 there. It's not super strong. I would say my consistent low is A2. So most of you, if you're a regular tenor or a contralto, you're going to get to at least an A2 on a daily basis. You might also have days where you get between G2 and F2. Wow, I managed to get that one out today. That was crazy. So that's really where it ends. Any lower than that, we're looking at bass baritone. There are no female voice types lower than that. Although the Guinness record for lowest female voice, I think, is like D2 or D sharp 2, which would actually be baritone. So like a super contralto. At that point, I would just say baritone. But tenor and contralto, you can train to belt up to C5, maybe D5. So I've done it, and that's, again, my full belt, aka chest voice. After that, we're going to have to start flipping, and usually our whole octaves can end all the way up at C6. Someone who's a contralto, it's density over length in the chords that's going to make it low. So I feel like C6 is not very accessible to me unless I've been stretching my folds a lot. It's usually B5 where my total range ends. Once in a while I can eke out a C6. And that's usually going to be it. And again, tenor, that's your falsetto going all the way up. But usually like your performable notes will be just a slightly lower than that. You're not going to perform up to your most highest note. And then basses and baritones, surprisingly, you're going to have the same lowest note on the bottom here, probably around C2 or D2. I can't sing those notes. When we're looking at that, the difference is, again, sort of like a density of the vocal cords. So basses, you're going to have sort of a shortened register, as more like 3 octaves, about 2 octaves of belting. I notice it caps out about middle C. And then your falsetto or your head voice or the rest of your register is going to go up to probably only C5. And then when we're talking about baritones, you could actually belt all the way up. It's going to be 2.5 octaves, all the way up to A4. You can train to go all the way up there. That'll be very, very high for you, so you probably would sing a little lower than that. But I've heard a lot of baritone songs that hover around the middle C area, C to F or C to G, and you get a lot of high baritone stuff there. It is high though for them. That'd be your physical max usually most of the time. And then when we get to the falsetto area, you're probably going to be maxing out around F5, maybe G5. If you end up having a wider range than that, then you are in truly overlapping and can do both. You are one of the exceptions. It's not very common though. And I'm not saying that to discourage you guys. I'm actually saying that to encourage you, because if we always try to go out for exceptional, we have to realize most of the singers we see don't actually have that exceptional physiology and are operating with much more reasonable limitations, even if they're impressive or artistically diverse or whatever. We have to realize, okay, we can do this if this is within range. And then we realize, for me, for example, a good example is like, if I want to cover songs by In This Moment, where Maria Brink is clearly a soprano, it's really hard for me to match, almost impossible for me to match the same belt tones in the same place. Not on every note exactly, but on the high notes. Okay. So what I usually like to do is I like to transpose their songs way down, like a third, pretty far. Don't let how far you have to go, because my voice is way on the opposite end of her voice, right? So I'm going to transpose it down quite a bit to do it in a better key where I can hit the notes in the same style relative to me. And the audience just doesn't perceive a lot of the things like that. The musicians are on stage generally, not in the audience. And the more famous someone is and the more professional someone is, the more I see stuff like this where the key is changed, not less. You can change it from where you recorded it with your band to where you perform it live. Everybody has to be on the same page, but with technology, this is a pretty easy thing to accomplish. And we see this a lot. I've seen a lot of covers of these K-pop Demon Hunter songs, which were so high to begin with. They might have been tuned like artificially high, where it's super unrealistic for human beings to actually sing them. And a lot of the covers are way tuned down. They're way in different keys because human beings have to realistically be able to access those notes. Even if it's still high relative to the person, they had to bring it down most of the time to make it an accessible cover. But a lot of you guys don't realize that, because you're in the audience member kind of viewing point. And that's what part of what we do. We're putting on a little bit of a magic show as musicians, and we are doing some sleight of hand, if you will. And that's a big part of putting on a good show and a good performance and nailing things. It's not that we are actually superhuman. It's creating the belief that we're superhuman. So thanks, guys. I hope this helps make sense and kind of continue that conversation that we started in the other video. As always, links to my lessons and courses and things are all over the videos, in the cards and the end screens, and as well in the links below in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll be back soon with more voice hacks.